Hello everyone, this is part 5 of What If Naruto Got Lost in Time, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Alright, Minato backed away hastily, hands up in what he assumed to be the universal surrender. I won't. The way Naruto was watching him with unreadable, impassive eyes made rethink his assumption. The Sandaime retained his pensive expression as Minato gazed guiltily at the now awake blonde, seeming to take this all in thought and turn it slowly in his head. Perhaps awising the blonde, who knew? The Sandaime had the veritable reputation of being quite the astute psychoanalyst, a trait he used derisively during his career. Again, that slight tug to the bottom of his gut sharpened as he thought about the Sandaime, about his illustrious long-winded career as a ninja that, still, lingered in the aftertaste of each Fire Nation breath, long after he'd stopped being just a ninja. Minato was aware that the Sandaime had high hopes for him, and thought him more than qualified for the job. But Minato wasn't so sure himself. After all he saw on the bed was a slightly frightened, defensive teenager, though surely the Sandaime saw something else. Minato. Sarutobi began slowly. The blonde broke out of his thoughts. Hokage-sama. Would you mind excusing us for a moment? Hiruzen began with a slight quirking to his lips. I believe our young friend may have some important information for me, though I don't think he'd be comfortable sharing it with you. The brief flare of jealousy that erupted with the words was quickly crushed by Minato. It shouldn't be any of his concern if Sarutobi had something personal with this boy. After all, who was he to say anything about it? They'd only met recently, he surely wasn't anyone of importance in Naruto's life. Of course, he answered easily enough, swallowing through the lump in his tea. Though his joints felt stiff as he exited the room, closing the door behind him, closed his eyes and let out a deep breath, as if finally releasing all the pressure and tension that seemed to hover heavily over the room. Then his eyes snapped open. Two pairs of guilt-ridden eyes stared up at him from his two students on their hands and knees, pressed against the door. You too? Minato sighed, exasperated. Obito leapt to his feet with a sheepish grin, rubbing the back of his head as Rin shamefully crawled off the floor. We were just wondering if Naruto was okay. The girl began hastily. We knew he had woken up, but then the Sandaime. Why's the Sandaime in Naruto's room? Obito interrupted excitedly. What's going on? Anything cool? Minato wished he knew himself. No, he waved him off. Not that I know of. Oh, Obito drooped, though he still looked mildly curious. So why is the Sandaime in there? Good question. Minato quipped, wondering the same himself. Not for the first time, he was a little annoyed at getting left out of the loop. I guess he wanted to ask Naruto some questions. Rin snapped up with wide eyes. Is Naruto getting in trouble? She asked, frightened. I'm not sure. Minato admitted. Well, he didn't think so. Why would the Sandaime get mad at Naruto? Obito rolled his eyes, scoffing. Naruto was so badass. I'm sure it's nothing. And then, with excitement. Maybe he's getting a medal. Minato shook his head, smile dry of all emotion. Who knows? Why don't we head to the cafeteria though? I could use some food. Of course, sensei. Rin piped up, grabbing him by the hand and physically dragging him down the hall. Obito caught up quick enough, already in better spirits at the thought of food. So, the Sandaime began, amiably enough. Do you mind if I sit down, Naruto-kun? Naruto's eyes never once strayed from the elder shinobi, never once blinked. His heart seemed caught in a cage 3 sizes too small, attempting to struggle its way out with rapid movement. No sure, go ahead. Hiruzen nodded, pulling a chair next to the bed. Now, Naruto-kun, you don't mind if I call you that, do you? It's fine. Naruto answered quickly. Well alright then, Naruto-kun. The man crossed his legs, pulling out his pipe from one of the assorted pockets dotting the inside of his robe, a small flame flickering to life at his fingers, a technique he'd passed down to Naruto at some point. I figured we may as well get comfortable with each other. I've been told we were very close at some point. There was a moment in which Naruto said nothing at all, blinking the first time since he'd woken up. Then his eyes widened. I'm sorry. His mouth attempted to make more words, but nothing came out. Instead, he sat up higher on the pillows, and tried to swallow all the confusion in his tea. What I mean is, how did you? Let me tell you a story, Naruto. Hiruzen smiled graciously. Would you like to hear it? The blonde rigorously nodded. I met a boy just like you, once. The Sandaime began, after a great heave of his pipe. The thick vanilla smell wafted into the room. He had blonde hair, perhaps a bit wilder, and 3 scars on his cheeks. He just began the end to something very tragic, I'd think. He had an expression to his face that I couldn't quite decipher. Quite a feat for me, you must understand. There are very few people I can't read clearly. Naruto only nodded numbly, listening with rapture. At any rate, he explained to me that I would be seeing a lot of him. He asked for my forgiveness, though for what, I'm still not sure. Though I insisted he at least stay for tea, as he'd been in the rain this whole time, he declined. He continued to assure me that we'd be seeing a lot of one another, and that we would have quite a lot of tea. He sounded so sure of himself. The Sandaime ashed his pipe, still not looking at the blonde on the bed. That was 20 years ago. Naruto's eyes widened. Just after the end of the First Shinobi War. He didn't make much sense to me at the time, this grim man in the rain. I thought him just another ninja, lost after a tumultuous war. Imagine my surprise when I met him a few years later, in a watermelon patch with my newly appointed genin team. But he was different, you see. He was unsure and confused, just as confused as I was. There was no recognition in his eyes. This was a man who had never met me. How strange then, that I remembered his face and his scars from a lifetime ago. And now, in a hospital bed, after apparently saving 4 of my shinobi. Naruto only looked down, unsure of what to say, of even where to begin. Now, I don't require any answers from you, Naruto. Ended the Sandaime magnanimously. I'm aware that your doings are your own. I've come to some of my own conclusions, and quite honestly, I know enough not to question you. And then, with a smirk, after all, it's never a good idea to mess with time. Naruto looked down guiltily, rubbing at his arm. Yeah, I guess I really fed things up, huh? Sarutobi shook his head. No, you're embarking on a journey entirely of your own. I've seen the ending, and the beginning too, I suppose. But the middle is up to you. And you'll let me go. Naruto blinked in surprise. Just like that. What will happen, advised the old man tenderly. Who am I to get in the way of that? Though it made quite a bit of sense, Naruto could imagine Jiraiya having quite a few different words to say to that. He didn't truly believe the words himself. What did this mean? Sarutobi had just imparted some of a future that had never happened to him yet, at least, part of his future. To the Sandaime, it was all in the past. How very confusing. Is there anything I should tell our young friend out there? Sandaime changed conversation quickly, the last of his pipe smoking in the air. Naruto snapped back to the man. Friend. And then, oh, you mean Minato. The man would probably have quite a few questions. To be careful, Naruto decided upon finally. And to believe in himself, and follow his dreams. Naruto blinked away the burn in his eyes, wondering where in himself this was drudging up from. Perhaps some part of him he'd buried deep beneath his mind, where it could be treasured and forgotten. This unconditional love he used to hold for the dream he used to have. For the father he had imagined for himself. Sound advice. Perhaps he could use some of your confidence, Naruto. For such an able man, he has very little for himself. The Sandaime noted. And though I'm sure you already know Naruto-kun, my office is open for all those who need it. I know. Naruto smiled, wondering how it was possible for one man to change so little. That was the thing with old men, they didn't change. Just as the Sandaime turned to leave, fear bubbled into his mouth. What if? Naruto's soft voice halted the Sandaime in his tracks. What if I'm messing everything up? Naruto wondered aloud, brokenly, the majority of his deepest fears so forthcoming in the face of his wise teacher and beloved Hokage, lost so long ago. What if the future I make is wrong? If it's a terrible ending that I don't want? You can't change destiny, Naruto-kun. Sarutobi counseled, before pausing. Though, I suppose, If anyone could, it would be you. The moment the Sandaime opened the door, he was met with 3 sheepish faces right on the other side. The old man blinked at their stupidly smiling faces, Team 7 quite obviously aware they'd been caught trying to listen in. Good thing that the Sandaime had made sure to use a silencing jutsu beforehand, for Minato's acute ears would have surely heard everything. Everyone's okay then. Sarutobi smiled. Obito and Rin nodded, blushing. The old man turned to Minato. And you as well. I've been fine for a while. Minato said honestly, rubbing at his hair. They're just keeping me here for precaution, I guess. Well, it's good to see you well, my friend. And then, turning to his young teammates. And how good it is to see you two as well. I take it neither of you were injured. No, sir. Rin and Obito answered in perfect unison, looking too cowed by the Sandaime's immediate presence for the usual bravado. With that, the old Hokage walked off, only giving a meaningful look to his successor as he passed. Minato wondered what wisdom the man was trying to impart on him, before shaking it off and heading towards Naruto. What did he talk to you about? Minato asked quietly. Your mission. Naruto paused. Yeah, something like that. He answered vaguely. He just gave me a lot to think about. Minato hummed in agreement. He does that a lot, doesn't he? And, to Naruto's questioning look, seem like he knows everything, I mean. He does. Naruto agreed. People really look up to him around here. Minato sighed wistfully, wondering how long it would be for them to do the same to him. Not that he didn't have the village's adoration. No, they seemed to like him quite a bit. But he didn't quite feel like he'd earned the respect quite yet. Not of many of the veteran shinobi, anyway. Many of them thought him a young upstart who had connived the elderly Hokage into the position. They'll do the same to you. Naruto told him, for once quite honestly. You'll be a village hero too. Minato frowned. How can you be so sure of that? And the other blonde only gave him that confusing, capricious smile. Intuition, I suppose. Naruto. Obito barreled headfirst into the room, noodles hanging limply from his mouth and ramen broth spilling onto Rin, who squawked at the scalding water. The two traipsed in, assortment of food and all, leaping onto stools and making themselves comfortable. Minato only watched fondly as his team proceeded to bombard the blonde with an uncomfortable amount of questions. It was strange, the blonde thought idly, watching Minato snap his fingers in Obito's face. The Uchiha perked up, such emotion to his pale face, so unlike Sasuke's impassive features, quickly and turned to his sensei, who was smiling with bemusement. Rin was handing him chocolate mochi, keeping all the strawberry for herself and leaving all the green tea ones untouched. Naruto was equally thankful for them, even though he charged mouth first into the extra bowl Obito had brought along with him. Thankful that she'd even think to bring him any. To include him. Obito somehow managed to wrangle Team 7, plus Naruto and minus Kakashi, who was stuck in the hospital with what seemed to be a terrible bout of infection, into the ramen stand, crowding the small stall with the 4 of them, but making Tuki into one happy man. Serves him right. The bottomless pit was saying around his noodles, the 4th bowl of the day, apparently. I always tell him to spray some disinfectant, but he thinks he's too cool for that kind of stuff. That stupid kid. Obito snorted, referring to said sick teammate. You're a stupid kid too. Rin pointed out with spite. And don't be so mean to Kakashi. You know, Nurse Ranma told me that he was hallucinating. Isn't that crazy? Poor Kakashi. But Obito only choked on his laughter. Oh god, that's priceless. What about Rin Rin-chan? Let's visit him tomorrow, okay? And bring your camera. No, shrieked Rin, shocked. Minato was seated next to Naruto, looking down at his broth. But Naruto could make out his sour expression, like he was fighting off his smile. He couldn't keep his mind off of what the Sandaime had said. He hadn't given Naruto more to think about, he blew his mind. Did that mean he'd time travel even more in the future? Was this some sort of ominous prophecy of things to come? He couldn't even wrap his mind around it. He'd heard about the future from someone who'd lived it in the past. Did that make sense? Could it make sense? You okay there, Naruto? The blonde blinked, mirrored Windsor blue eyes staring back at him with concern. You look a bit pale. Minato added as an afterthought, though it was a little hard to tell with the titan the other blonde was sporting. This close though, the Yondaime could make out the almost grayish shade of blue to the other's eyes, the speckle of Prussian around the iris and the spray of almost freckles lined around his lashes. I'm fine. Naruto waved him off hastily, taking a long gulp of the leftover broth in his bowl. Well, he was certainly eating healthily, that was for sure. The blonde Junin from the future wiped at his mouth with his sleeve, thoughts suddenly twisting to the Hokage in front of him. Who'd have thought that the infamous Yondaime, one of the most renowned Hokage in recent history, could be so insecure? To think that the fearless man of history was scared of the opinions of a handful of civilians. Albeit, Konoha may be a bit more than a handful, but the man faced down the nine-tailed demon fox. Surely he hadn't been scared then, right? Naruto's eyes lingered on the other blonde, who had turned to grab Obito under his arm for a vicious noogie, Rin's howl of laughter muted by his own thoughts. Surely, at the very end, he hadn't regretted it. Naruto had always assumed that Minato had just sort of thought that he was doing what was best for his people, had just kind of thought that the village would think of the blonde as some sort of hero, and that life would carry on happily. But a small part of him thought back to the Minato against the dim underwash of hospital grays, sunlight nebulized by the distance in his eyes, vulnerable. By the time he'd surfaced from the murky waters of his musings, Obito was subdued, hair wilder than it had been before, and Rin had regained her breath to lightly pick at her salad once more. Minato was watching the two of them again, with that fond expression he'd had in the hospital. You're doing a good job. Naruto found himself saying, wondering why he thought Minato even wanted to hear this. The Yondaime turned to him, confused. With them. He nudged to the man's two genin students. And with Konoha. For a moment, the older blonde said nothing at all, only wearing a look of vague incomprehension, before a shy, hesitant smile took to his face. You think so? He asked quietly. Naruto felt his gut twist in guilt at the hopefulness in Minato's voice. He'd hated this man for the longest time. Condemned him in his mind for the deepest pit in hell. Yes, he answered, regardless. It was already angry. Minato pointed out, face turning grim. He looked away, angry enough to attempt an assassination, even when they hardly have the strength to rebuild. Konoha has bigger problems to worry about than a Wagakur. Naruto waved him off, and they'll cool off, after some negotiations. Most of them, anyway. Naruto knew that even 20 years in the future, Kakashi's name would hold the highest sum in the Wagakur bingo book. You're really knowledgeable about all these politics and stuff. Rin noted shyly, peering over from being Minato's shoulder. Naruto smiled at her. I was there for a few years, remember? And then, with a laugh. I probably already sound more like a diplomat than a shinobi. But you kick ass on the battlefield. Obito crowed. Naruto only attempted to laugh it off. What was that technique, anyway? Rin asked, curiously. The one that kind of looked like Sensei's. At the mention of the Rasengan-like technique they'd seen that day, Minato's curiosity was piqued as well. Naruto swallowed. Well, it's just something I made up. I have a wind affinity, you see, so it's sort of made to work like a vacuum and the other one. Obito broke in, and Naruto almost cried in relief at Obito's unbridled excitement, for once coming in handy. The big fire thingy. That's a blood limit. Naruto cut in quickly. Never seen a blood limit like that. There are a lot of them you haven't seen. Minato shushed the Uchiha swiftly, rolling his eyes. Konoha's not the only place that has them, you know. And think of how many we have, just in the village. Rin hummed. Well, there's the Inuzuka, the Akamaki, the Yamanaka, the Nara, the Hyuga, and the Uchiha, of course. Minato nodded sternly. Trust the blonde to turn this into some sort of teacher-student lecture. That's right. There's lots of them all over the world. That's gotta be millions, then. Not that many. The Yondaime chuckled. They're still fairly uncommon. But there are quite a few. And then, to Naruto. Where does yours originate from? Put on the spot, Naruto could only open his mouth, half words and thoughts tumbling out of his mouth. Well, I get it from my mother. She, well, I don't know much about her, but she came from Azushiogakur, I think, but Azushiogakur. Rin gasped, excitedly. Wow, you know, that place doesn't exist anymore. While simultaneously, Minato's brows pulled together. Azushiogakur. As Obito jumped up, wicked. Overwhelmed, Naruto only blinked at them all. And then, finally, I didn't know it was such a big deal. He croaked out. Big deal. Rin echoed incredulously. You're from Azushiogakur. Not really. Naruto protested hastily. My mom's from there, well I think she's half from there, anyway, I don't really know. Are you a Fuinjutsu master? Obito was already halfway in his face. I hear they're all super cool sealing masters. Well yes, but, no way. Rin had jumped up too, the both of them already so close even as Minato attempted to pry them away. Well then you're absolutely from Azushiogakur. Have you ever been there? What was it like? Gosh, we learned all about it at the academy and I've always wanted to go. Whoa. Finally, Minato managed to pry them both away from him, leaving Naruto to breath heavily, feeling like he'd been mauled by rabid attack dogs. Let's not K him with questions, huh? Hey, Rin turned to Minato. Isn't Kushina-san from Azushiogakur? Minato blinked. She is. Minato affirmed with a light smile. Naruto remembered to feign ignorance. Kushina-san. He repeated, keeping a touch of confusion in his tone. Sensei's girlfriend. Rin crooned. Minato, for his part, was blushing. Though he most definitely was pleased. Naruto turned to him. Is that true? Well, yeah. Well I'm sure she's really nice. Naruto commented neutrally, unsure of what else to say. It wasn't like he could just say, yeah I already knew that. She's my mom, you know. Oh, and speaking of which, you're my dad. You should meet her, Minato said, before he could stop himself. At Naruto's surprised face, he realized his words. There were very few people that were of Minato's relationship with Kushina. And out of that handful, only Jiraiya was aware of how serious they were. His team was aware of her, yes. Met her a few times, even. But most certainly weren't aware of her status as the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, let alone the fact that Minato found himself contemplating the thought of marrying her. He'd never put himself or her so foolishly in danger by making him official, or by telling anyone, let alone a stranger he'd met a few days ago. Like Naruto. Yeah, sure, the other blonde agreed amiably. Yet Minato hadn't even hesitated. But why? It wasn't that he didn't trust the blonde, because oddly, the other Junin had managed to worm his way through most of Minato's defenses. But they had only met a few days prior. There was something about Naruto. But what was it? That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.